Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little uncomfortable. You'll wake up on a chilly morning, the kind where your breath fogs in front of your face, and realize that you're not in your cozy bed anymore, but on a straw-filled sack, barely softer than the ground. Because tonight, you're spending the day in a medieval village. You probably won't survive it, but at least you'll learn why from under about 7 scratchy wool blankets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget, drop your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes open to the sound of a rooster. It's not a charming cartoon rooster. It's a shrill, real-life squawk that makes you groan. The air smells like damp wool and something faintly like old onions. It's still dark out, but in the Middle Ages, dawn is when life restarts, ready or not. You shift and feel the stiffness in your back from sleeping on a straw-stuffed mattress, one that's housed more fleas than feathers in its time. The straw pokes through the thin linen cover, and there's a definite cold draft slipping through the wooden slats of the walls. The floor is packed dirt. You look around your one-room cottage, a hearth with gray embers, a wooden bucket half filled with rainwater, and 2 chickens that have somehow found their way inside. There's no privacy, no bathroom, no softness. You slept in your undertunic because pajamas aren't a thing, and your breath is visible in the chill. The fire went out hours ago, and reigniting it will take time. Flint and patience you don't yet have. You try not to think about how you're going to wash yourself. Spoiler, you're not really. As you sit up, your joints creak like an old wooden door, and you begin to itch. Lice or fleas, or both. Personal hygiene, as you'll soon learn, isn't a priority, nor is warmth. You rub your eyes and try to ignore the fact that you can hear mice scurrying under your bed. You pull on a coarse wool tunic, the fibers rough against your skin. It smells faintly of smoke and something sour. Soap exists technically, but it's mostly for clothes or wealthy people, or both. You step outside and are hit with a gust of morning air that smells like livestock mud and smoke. The ground is slick with dew, and there are no sidewalks, just rutted paths where pigs and people share the way. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant truly hated their life or simply didn't know anything different. What's not debated is the sheer physical discomfort of existing, the scratch of homespun cloth, the cold of unheated stone, the relentless bite of nature at your doorstep. Most homes have no glass windows. Instead, there are wooden shutters or oiled parchment that barely let in light and let out most of the heat. You take a few tentative steps in your wooden clogs. They don't fit well and pinch your toes. The chickens peck at your feet. Somewhere nearby, a child starts to cry, and a dog barks in answer. This is the soundscape of your morning. You think longingly of coffee, but that won't be around in Europe for another few centuries. Tea. Also, nope, unless you're a wealthy merchant with exotic contacts. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is coming. But first, you'll need to go outside. You know what that means. There's no bathroom, just a pit, or a wooden bench with a hole in it out back, surrounded by buzzing flies and your own regrets. As you trudge toward it, trying to avoid slipping in something unpleasant, you catch sight of the sun rising behind a thatched roof. It's beautiful, yes, in the way early mornings can be, but you're tired, itchy cold, and already slightly miserable, and the day hasn't even started. Welcome to medieval life. The morning breeze doesn't get any warmer, and your fingers are starting to go numb. Still, it's time to tackle the least glamorous part of the day, basic hygiene. Don't expect a toothbrush, let alone minty freshness. What you've got is a wooden stick, frayed at one end, and if you're lucky, a bit of charcoal or crushed herbs. Most people used ash or salt rubbed straight onto the teeth. You try it, and it's like grinding sandpaper over your molars. Better than nothing, but barely. Your teeth feel gritty, your breath still reeks, and worst of all, you can already feel the twinge of an aching molar. Medieval dental care mostly involved ignoring the pain until it was unbearable, then yanking the offending tooth out with metal pliers, no anesthesia. If you were particularly unlucky, a local barber might treat you by cauterizing your gums with hot iron. Tooth decay wasn't just common, it was practically inevitable, thanks to all the coarse bread filled with stone dust from primitive milling techniques. Historians still argue whether diet or dental neglect was the primary culprit for medieval tooth loss. But the end result is the same. You're going to be gumming your turnips by 30. There's no running water in your cottage. That bucket of rainwater from last night is what you'll use to splash your face. It's icy and smells vaguely like the wooden roof it dripped from. There's a bar of soap nearby, brown, cracked, and pungent. It's made from animal fat and ashes, and it leaves your skin feeling tighter than a drum. Still, it beats the alternative, not washing and attracting even more fleas. Speaking of which, you start inspecting yourself for lice. Everyone has them. Combs with fine metal teeth exist, but they're a luxury. Most people just pick the lice off by hand or ignore them until an infestation forces a haircut. You scratch your head and try not to think about it too much. Next comes your mouth rinse, and this is where things get exciting if you enjoy medieval chemistry experiments. People believed rinsing with vinegar wine or even urine could kill mouth bacteria. That's right, some folks gargled with their own pee. You decline the offer. Vinegar it is. It burns your throat and makes you wince. But now, your breath smells less like rotting hay and more like a salad that's gone off. Your skin is dry from the wind and cold, and there's no moisturizer in sight. People used animal fat or rendered lard for cracked skin, thick, greasy, and very smelly. You smear some on your chapped hands and immediately regret it. But hey, cracked skin is an open invitation for infection. And infection is the #1 way to shuffle off this mortal coil in the 14th century. So you endure the stink. You glance at your reflection in a chipped bit of polished metal. Pale, hollow-eyed. You look like someone who hasn't had REM sleep since the invention of the crossbow. There are no mirrors, no razors, no makeup, unless you're wealthy or headed to church. And let's not even talk about body odor. Deodorant as a concept won't arrive for another several centuries. People cover their scent with herbs if they can afford them, or simply accept that everyone smells vaguely like damp wool and onions. You glance at the bundle of clothing waiting for you, a rough wool tunic stained from use and heavy with dampness, linen hose that itch like they were woven from thistles, and wooden clogs. Your undergarments. A simple linen shirt that will double as pajamas tonight, assuming it survives the day. There's no elastic, no tailoring, just drawstrings and hope. And don't forget the belt pouch, your medieval version of pockets. Getting dressed is an ordeal, mostly because wool over wet skin is never a good idea. But you manage, and once the final layer is on, you're sweating a little under the arms, freezing at the fingers, and wondering how people ever got used to this. But they did, mostly because they had no choice. As you step back outside, you're already exhausted, and that was just your morning routine. Time for breakfast, or as you'll soon call it, the beige course. You make your way to the hearth where someone, probably you, has been tasked with preparing the morning meal. The fire is stubborn, requiring blowing coaxing and the patience of a monk. Finally, with enough dried twigs and a fair bit of muttered frustration, the flames flicker to life. Breakfast is a simple affair: porridge. Not the comforting oat-filled bowl you might know from lazy weekends, but something more aggressive. This gruel is made from barley or rye, boiled in water, with the occasional dash of salt if you're lucky. More often, it tastes of the iron pot and the soot hanging from the rafters. It's thick, lumpy, and sticky in the wrong ways. Every bite requires effort, not just to chew, but to ignore the crunch of gritstone particles from poorly milled flour that will one day cost you several teeth. You try not to think about that as you take your first bite. It's warm at least, and fills your stomach in the way glue fills cracks. Medieval people rarely got hungry in the way we think of hunger. Today, they were used to it, lived with it. Chronic undernourishment was a fact of life. Children often went through growth stunts, and adults wore their hard lives on their faces and rib cages. You scrape the bottom of the pot with a wooden spoon and find a slightly burned bit clinging to the side. It's the highlight of the meal: extra flavor, accidentally. Meat is rare, reserved for feast days or those in the upper echelons of society. Eggs. Possibly if your chickens are laying. But right now, those chickens are too busy nesting on your blanket. So you eat your porridge and try to chew. Get past the gravel. As you eat, a neighbor stops by with a clay jug of small ale. That's right ale for breakfast. Not the kind to knock you off your feet, but a weak brew with less alcohol than orange juice. Why? Because water is often unsafe to drink. Rivers and wells can be contaminated with waste, so everyone from toddlers to elders drinks low alcohol beer. It's tangy, musty, and slightly sour, but safer than cholera. You sip it and cough. It's not pleasant, but your stomach accepts it more willingly than the porridge. Historians still argue whether the average peasant consumed more liquid calories than solid ones. But the point is, beer wasn't a treat. It was hydration. And it made life slightly more bearable. You glance out the open door as you eat. The village is beginning to stir. Dogs bark, roosters crow, and the pungent aroma of dozens of fires and animals fills the air. There's no silence in the Middle Ages. Even in the smallest hamlet, life is noisy, smelly, and close. You hear someone shouting at a runaway pig. Another curses the sky. A baby wails. A sheep bleats, possibly in protest. Your hands are sticky from breakfast. There's no napkin, no running water, no sink. You wipe them on your tunic knowing it will smell even worse by lunch. Hygiene is more about appearances than cleanliness. Mud and food stains are marks of labor, not shame. You try to relax for a moment. Breakfast, after all, is the only pause some people get before work begins. You sit near the hearth and feel the faintest warmth on your face. You hear your stomach protest, not out of hunger, but in confusion. This isn't food. It's texture and obligation. Then a bell rings. Not a school bell, not a friendly ding. This is the clanging toll of your Lord's Manor bell, or perhaps the church's. It means the day's tasks are beginning. You sigh, not because you've had a long day already, but because you know it's about to get much, much worse. You rise, scrape your bowl with a stick, and head out the door. The mud waits. You step outside and are immediately reminded that medieval fashion wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed to survive the elements, and barely that. Your tunic scratches like burlap, dipped in thistles. The wool is unlined, heavy when damp, and always slightly itchy. Underneath your linen shirt, clings awkwardly to your skin, still cold from the morning air. Today, your first task is one nobody envies dung duty. You're headed to the latrine pit, a shallow trench at the back of the property, shielded by a few loosely nailed boards and a prayer. It smells exactly as you'd expect, and that's before you've even started shoveling. Waste doesn't just disappear in the Middle Ages. It piles up. And then someone often you has to deal with it. You grab a wooden spade, more splinter than tool, and begin scooping the semi-frozen, very pungent mess into a bucket. The plan: haul it to the dung heap on the edge of the village, far enough from homes to avoid a stench-based uprising, but close enough to fertilize the communal gardens. Your hands cramp around the handle. The wood is cold and damp. You're breathing through your mouth, but it barely helps. To make it worse, the mud around the trench is deceptive. It's not mud. It's a bog of yesterday's rain and decades of foot traffic. You slip just a little and your clog gets stuck. You yank it free with a wet squelch. The bucket sloshes and you decide right then that medieval footwear is a betrayal. Wooden soles might protect against sharp objects, but they have all the grip of a greased eel. Still, you carry on. Because if you don't, the smell will creep into every breath you take tonight. Some unlucky souls have it even worse. They're gong farmers, full-time waste collectors for towns and castles. They wade into cesspits knee-deep and shovel out centuries of human history one bucket at a time. The job pays surprisingly well, but the risk of disease and social isolation is high. Historians still argue whether these workers were respected for their service or shunned like plague carriers. Probably both. You dump the waste, rinse the bucket with a ladle of stale water, and take a moment to breathe upwind. Your arms ache. It's barely mid-morning. Back home, you change out of your dung-smeared tunic. The fresh one smells only faintly of smoke and onions. Laundry is a full-day chore involving wooden paddles, lye soap, and riverside scrubbing. Clothes are rarely truly clean, just rotated until they disintegrate. The rich might own 5 outfits. You're lucky to have 2. You adjust your belt tie, your pouch, and sling a hood over your head. It's windy, and your ears are starting to sting. Gloves, not unless you make them. Most people don't. So you tuck your hands into your sleeves and trudge back toward the village square, where the day's real work awaits. On the way, you pass other villagers engaged in their own routines. A woman is shaking out a wool blanket, clouds of dust escaping into the air. Children chase a dog through the mud. A man is stacking firewood, coughing with every other breath. You nod in greeting. They nod back. Everyone looks tired, and everyone smells faintly of everything. The road through the village isn't paved. It's not even a road, really more of a suggestion. Just a rut-filled track of compacted mud, strewn with straw, manure, and hope. The air is thick with the earthy musk of livestock and smoke. Chickens dart across your path, pecking at invisible snacks in the muck. A pig stares at you unimpressed, then snorts and resumes digging up someone's discarded turnip top. This is your commute. It might only be a few hundred yards to the fields or workshop, but every step is a hazard. Your wooden clogs have no traction. Every patch of damp straw hides something sinister. Animal droppings, jagged stones, or a slick that smells suspiciously like yesterday's latrine overflow. You try to keep your footing, but the path is uneven, and the village geese are mean. One of them lunges at your ankle. You yelp and sidestep, nearly falling into a puddle that may or may not be deeper than your knee. As you walk, the sights and sounds of medieval life unfold. A blacksmith's hammer rings out from his forge, clang, hiss, clang, the rhythm of labor. Smoke rises from cottage chimneys, curling into the still morning sky. A pair of girls carry baskets of laundry toward the river, their hems soaked and hands red from cold. Nearby, a man is arguing with a woman over what sounds like stolen firewood, his voice rising in theatrical complaint. Despite the chaos, there's a strange rhythm to it all. Everyone is busy. Everyone has a role. And you're still trying not to slip in something foul. Historians still argue whether the average medieval village was more cooperative or competitive. But one thing's for certain, privacy wasn't a thing. As you navigate the path, people see everything. What you're wearing, what you're carrying, whether your clogs are clean. Gossip spreads faster than the plague, and reputations are built or destroyed with little more than a passing glance and a raised eyebrow. You stop to help a boy who's dropped his bucket. Water splashes across your tunic. He thanks you with a shy grin, then vanishes into a side lane. Children here grow up fast. They're fetching water, tending goats, mending tools, full members of the workforce by age 7. And if they survive infancy, which many don't, they're expected to contribute like everyone else. The village is small, maybe 30 families, but it's dense. Cottages huddle together for warmth and protection. Chickens perch on thatched roofs. Dogs bark from behind makeshift fences. You pass the local alehouse, not yet open, though someone's already sweeping out yesterday's sawdust and spilled dreams. A woman leans out of a window to dump a chamber pot into the gutter. You sidestep instinctively. Too late. Welcome to town life. Eventually, the path slopes toward the fields beyond the last row of homes. Here, the air changes slightly, fewer animals, more earth. You can see the mist lifting off furrowed plots of barley and rye. This is where much of your day will be spent, bent over digging, sowing, or harvesting depending on the season. And even though your legs are already aching from just the walk, the real work hasn't even begun. You reach the edge of the field and pause to catch your breath. A donkey brays behind you, sounding just as tired as you feel. You can see the manor house far off on the hill, watching over everything like a stern landlord. Because it is. Everything you do today, every clump of soil you turn, every weed you pull, is technically for them. You owe labor, rent, and taxes. Always taxes. You sigh and step into the field. Your feet sink into the loam. It's going to be a long day. The village steward greets you at the field's edge with all the warmth of a damp stone. He gestures toward a stretch of uneven soil tools already laid out. Today's Shis's labor roster, he informs you, includes weeding, carrying bundles of kindling, and if time allows, helping the tanner unload a fresh delivery of hides. You consider running just for a moment. But where would you even go? You grab a hoe and begin to work the soil. It's a slow, monotonous task. Scrape, yank, pile. Your back complains almost instantly. There's no ergonomic anything here. Just the constant awareness that you could slip a disc bending for turnips. And yet others seem to be doing this without much fuss. One woman nearby weeds while bouncing a baby on her hip. A man with one good eye uses a stick to mark rows. They move like people who know this is their life, not just their morning. Still, you're not stuck here forever yet. You've been assigned to help with some alternate tasks, and here's where things get creative. You're sent to the tanner's shack. The smell hits you before you even reach it. Rotting flesh, urine, animal brains, lime-soaked hair. It's a fragrance that clings to your soul. Tanners use a process that involves soaking hides in everything from fermented dog dung to aged human urine. It's all in the name of softening the leather. You gag, quietly, repeatedly. The tanner hands you a dripping cowhide and tells you to drag it to the stretching rack. You do, barely keeping it from slapping against your legs. It's cold and rubbery, and it stinks like bad stew. The stretching frame is crude, but effective, wooden pegs and ropes pulling the hide taut until it resembles parchment. You secure it, your fingers slipping on the grease. Historians still argue whether tanners were social outcasts or essential artisans. On one hand, they provided vital materials, shoes, belts, scrolls. On the other, they smelled like death warmed over and lived downwind of everyone else. Your guess? They were essential outcasts. People needed them, but preferred not to know them. After that, you're told to help the gong farmer. Yes, they've remembered you. Apparently, your bucket work earlier was so enthusiastic that you've earned a promotion. You trudge toward the edge of the village, where the cesspits bubble like medieval hot tubs from your nightmares. The gong farmer, a wiry man with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's seen things, hands you a long-handled scoop and tells you not to breathe too deeply. You nod, horrified, and begin to help. The muck is thick and unyielding. Every scoop is a workout. Every splash is a betrayal. Still, the gong farmer hums to himself. You ask how he can stand it. He shrugs. Better pay than the baker, he says. And it's true. Dangerous, dirty jobs often paid more. Of course, they also killed faster. Infections, collapsed pits, and the occasional rat swarm were all occupational hazards. You try not to think about any of that as something squishy drips onto your shoe. Later, back at the fields, your return is met with sympathetic glances. One woman offers you a scrap of cloth for your nose. You accept it gratefully, even though it smells like pickled cabbage. Anything is better than the odor clinging to you now. By the end of the shift, your shoulders are raw. Your back feels like it's been trampled by a mule, and your hands are covered in blisters. And yet you survived. Barely. You trudge back to the village square as the bells begin to ring for the midday pause. There's still lunch to come. You're already dreading it. The bell tolls, and you feel something close to relief, not joy. Your stomach is too apprehensive for that, but the anticipation of sitting down, however briefly, and consuming anything that doesn't smell like cowhide or human waste. You follow the slow migration of villagers toward the common green where lunch is usually eaten outdoors, weather permitting. Today, the sky is gray, the wind sharp, and your nose still filled with trace notes of tannery, but yes, technically, it's permitting. Lunch is more of a reset than a reward. You're handed a shallow wooden bowl and a hunk of coarse brown bread. In the bowl, more porridge. Different grain this time, millet, or maybe oats, but it's just as gray and just as lumpy. You give it a tentative stir. Floating in it are a few sad shreds of boiled greens and something that might have once been a bit of bacon fat, long since sacrificed to someone else's spoon. There's no cutlery beyond a wooden spoon you wiped on your tunic this morning. You scoop a mouthful. It's warm, but entirely flavorless. Salt is expensive spices, even more so. Only the rich enjoy meals that smell like anything beyond boiled things. You chew and chew. The texture isn't entirely unpleasant. It's mushy, a little gritty, and sticky. Like school cafeteria food made with medieval pessimism. Someone next to you offers a pickle. You take it greedily, then instantly regret it. It's not the cucumber kind you're used to. It's more like a sour turnip soaked in brine until it gave up. Still, it breaks the monotony of beige. Pickled vegetables are the medieval answer to vitamin deficiencies. Unfortunately, so is scurvy. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants received enough nutrition from their limited diets. The consensus barely. They survived, but not thrived. Protein was rare, and calories were often barely sufficient. In lean years, people resorted to tree bark flour, boiled weeds, even clay-rich bread that gave them a condition known as dirt belly. Someone tells a joke probably about the Lord's tax collector and a goose, and a few people chuckle. Laughter here is quick and low, like they're conserving energy. You try to join in, but it comes out as a wheeze. The porridge is sticking to your ribs like medieval cement. Nearby children play with sticks and rocks, giggling between bites of the same porridge you're trying to finish. Their hands are filthy, their faces streaked with soot, and they're wearing clothes that have clearly been patched more times than they were ever sewn. Yet they laugh, and that somehow makes the day seem less bleak. You sip from a shared jug of small ale passed down the line. The same musty, sour brew from breakfast. It goes down easier this time, maybe because your body is desperate for something to distract from porridge. Or maybe you're just adapting. As you scrape your bowl clean, You notice a few people aren't eating. They're bartering bits of cloth or handmade pins for food from others. The barter economy is alive and well. Currency exists, but coin is rare among common folk. Trade is king. A good knife, a warm cloak, a handful of dried herbs, these are as valuable as gold in a place where comfort is scarce. The wind shifts, and you smell a faint whiff of stew from the manor house uphill. Actual meat, cooked with onions and herbs. Your stomach growls in protest. That's not your food. Not today. Not ever. You finish your last bite of porridge, now cold, and rinse your bowl with a splash of rainwater. You dry it with the inside of your cloak, which frankly is probably less sanitary than just leaving it dirty. Someone stands and stretches. Back to it, they mutter. A general groan ripples through the group. The briefest moment of rest is over. Work resumes. You sigh, roll your shoulders, and rise. Your legs ache. Your back throbs. Your mouth still tastes of boiled grain. And your afternoon. It's about to include smoke incense and bloodletting. The midday bells continue to echo as you're shuffled somewhat involuntarily toward the village church. It's not Sunday, but in medieval life, religious observance is a daily rhythm, not a weekly appointment. Everyone is expected to attend some form of prayer or ritual during the day. And by expected, we mean required with consequences that range from stern glares to public penance. So off you go. The church is the only stone building in the village besides the manor house. It looms like a quiet guardian cold, a little damp, and very serious about its candle usage. You step inside and are met with a scent that's part reverent incense, part unwashed humanity. The stone floor is cold beneath your wooden clogs. There are no pews, just planks or mats if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's standing room and sore knees. The priest begins to chant in Latin. You don't understand a word, but you bow your head like everyone else and pretend. Latin literacy is rare. Most villagers only know the general gist. Prayers are said, sins are forgiven, and your afterlife prospects might improve slightly. That's the hope anyway. You try to keep your eyes open, but the smoke from the incense makes them sting. You cough, quietly. A woman nearby coughs back louder. The room is thick with smoke and breath. You realize there's almost no ventilation. The windows are high and narrow, designed more for structural integrity and holy gloom than airflow. You shift your weight, trying to ease the pressure on your feet. Every joint in your body reminds you that it prefers sitting even on a hay-stuffed sack. Someone in the front row passes out. Not dramatically, just a slow slump to the side. They're pulled upright by two others and left to nap against the wall. Nobody comments. Fainting during prayers isn't unusual. It's warmish in here compared to outside, and no one's eaten enough to maintain consciousness through 2 rounds of Ave Maria. Suddenly, there's a tap on your shoulder. A grim-looking friar gestures for you to follow. You glance around. Surely, he means someone else. But no, it's you. You stand knees cracking and shuffle behind him through a side door. You're led to a small stone room where a few others are gathered. A bucket, a sharp knife, and several cloth rags rest on a wooden table. Great. It's bloodletting time. Bloodletting isn't just for the sick in the Middle Ages. It's preventative. The theory is simple. If medically misguided, too much blood causes imbalance, so draining a bit now and then keeps your humors in check. You sit your arm extended and try not to look as the friar swabs it with vinegar. The knife is curved, not quite sharp, and he mutters a prayer as he nicks a vein. You don't faint. You want to, but you don't. The blood pools into a small bowl. You stare at it, slightly horrified. Then the friar presses a wad of old cloth against the cut, ties it with string, and gestures for the next person. That's it. You're dismissed. No lollipop, no sticker. Just blood loss and a vague sense of wooziness. You stumble back outside, blinking in the light. The air is clearer, the wind a little more welcome. You feel lightheaded, not surprising. You've eaten gruel, lost a few ounces of blood, and haven't sat comfortably all day. But at least the afternoon prayers are done. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine did more harm than good, and bloodletting is a classic case. While occasionally helpful in specific conditions, it was often overused and poorly understood. But it made people feel like something was being done. That's half the battle in any era. As you rejoin the others, you realize the day isn't close to over. There's still plenty of light and plenty more to suffer through. You've survived the church, the incense, and the leeches in human form. Next up, a little public humiliation. You've barely had time to gather your thoughts, let alone what remains of your blood, before another commotion begins in the village square. A small crowd is forming around the wooden stocks, and someone grabs your sleeve. They're calling names, the woman says, barely hiding a smirk. Might be yours next. Your stomach sinks. The stocks, those infamous leg and arm clamps, aren't just a punishment for major crimes. They're used for minor offenses too. Gossiping, skipping prayers, speaking out of turn, or even wearing the wrong color on a saint's day. You try to remember if you committed any of those sins. Then again, remembering won't help. The village constable, a wiry man with a stick thicker than his wrist, reads off names from a wax tablet. You sigh in relief when yours isn't called, but someone nudges you toward the platform anyway. Apparently, you're not in trouble. You're just supposed to help turn the cranks. Great. Volunteer. Executioner of dignity. The accused today. A young man who spoke during Mass and an older woman accused of suspicious herbalism. You raise an eyebrow. The villagers murmur. She talks to her rosemary bush, someone whispers. You suspect it's more a case of someone needing a scapegoat for a bad stomachache. You help lock the man into the stocks, the wood creaking as his head and hands are secured. He mutters something unrepeatable. The woman, surprisingly serene, settles into place with a dignity that makes everyone else uncomfortable. Being in the stocks isn't physically torturous unless it rains or the crowd turns mean. Mostly, it's embarrassing. Passers-by jeer, toss stale crusts, or offer unwanted advice. Some just gawk. Children laugh. You feel a pang of guilt, even though you didn't technically do anything. Historians still argue whether public punishments like these were effective deterrents or merely cruel pageantry. What's clear is they were communal events, less about justice and more about reinforcing social order. Everyone watches, everyone remembers, and everyone learns not to talk back to the priest. Eventually, the crowd disperses. The man sneezes violently. Someone tosses him a scrap of cloth. The herbalist woman begins humming, possibly to herself, possibly to the rosemary. You help unlock them as ordered. No applause, no absolution, just the end of one embarrassment and the slow shuffle into the next. You start to walk away, only to be stopped again, this time by a young girl holding a bundle. Mama says you've got to help with the root stew. She hands it over and vanishes. You sigh and make your way toward one of the cook fires near the village center. Several women are slicing turnips, leeks, and things that might be edible if you squint. You sit down grateful for the fire's warmth and begin chopping. Dinner is simpler than lunch, which is impressive. Just a thin stew of root vegetables with maybe a sprig of something green for luck. You stir the wooden spoon clicking against the iron pot and try not to drop anything. The smell is earthy, not bad, just repetitive. It's the same smell that's probably been wafting through this village for generations. Someone hands you a hunk of bread slightly stale. You dunk it. The stew softens it enough to chew without fear of dental collapse. Conversation is sparse. Everyone's tired. Even the fire seems to crackle more slowly. You eat with quiet determination. You're filthy sore, slightly anemic, and emotionally fragile. But you're not done yet. Dinner is just the intermission before the next act, because apparently it's your turn on the night watch. You barely have time to wipe your hands on your tunic before a stout man in a patchy leather vest claps you on the back. Night watch, he grunts. Come on, don't dawdle. You stifle a groan. You thought night patrols were for the real toughs, the burly guys with swords and eyebrows that scare children. But no, in the medieval world, guarding the village is everyone's job sooner or later. It's like jury duty, but with wolves. He hands you a staff more stick than weapon and a small horn. Blow this if something's on fire, or if you see bandits, or ghosts. He winks. You're not sure? He's joking. The patrol route circles the outer edge of the village, looping past the fields, the well, and the woods. It's getting dark fast. There are no street lamps, no ambient city glow, just the flicker of torches and the occasional candle in a cottage window. You walk in silence for the first few minutes. Your boots squelch in the mud. An owl hoots. Something rustles in the bushes, and your heart skips several necessary beats. Just a fox, your companion mutters. Or maybe a peasant turned into a fox. Hard to say this close to All Hallows. You give him a long look. He doesn't explain. As you patrol, you realize this is less about safety and more about appearance. Villagers feel better knowing someone is out looking tough and making noise. If something really dangerous did appear, a raiding party, say, or a pack of wolves, your best bet would be to blow that horn and run. Fast. You pause at the well. The rope creaks gently in the wind, like it's trying to remember a scary story it once heard. You shine your torch into the depths. Water glints far below. All seems well, for now. You move on, passing a cluster of barns. A door swings open slightly. You raise your staff, heart pounding. A chicken darts out, indignant. You let out a shaky laugh and close the door behind it. Historians still argue whether these night watches truly prevented crime or simply created a sense of order. But they were real duties, often assigned in rotation and taken seriously, at least until sleep overcame vigilance. Around midnight, you stop at a watch post, a small wooden lean-to with a bench and a candle stub. Your companion pours something from a leather flask, herbal mead, judging by the smell, and offers you a sip. You take it. It's warm, sweet, and surprisingly strong. Your cheeks flush instantly. For a moment, the stars are the only sound. Then distantly, a dog barks. Then another. You and your partner freeze. Could be wolves, he mutters. Could be nothing. You wait. A minute. 2. Silence returns. The night exhales. Eventually, your partner dozes, his head slumping against the wall. You try to stay awake, but it's a losing battle. Your eyes close. Your head nods. A torch sputters. You dream briefly of your own bed. Your real bed from your actual century, with pillows and sheets and central heating. You're nudged awake before dawn. Your shift's done, he says, standing and stretching. Time for morning chores. You stare at him. Morning already. No rest for the peasantry. You trudge back to your hut, exhausted, and barely notice the chill in the air. Your legs are numb, your brain foggy. The idea of sleep is a distant fantasy. But first, livestock chanting, and maybe a rat or two. Just another day in paradise. You're not sure if you slept or just lost consciousness. But the next thing you know, you're staring at the rafters of your cottage. They look back at you with mild disappointment. Morning has returned again, and so have your duties. The rooster crows, because of course it does. You groan, shift, and wince. Every muscle in your body aches, like it's been individually punished. Your clothes, yes, the same ones, are wrinkled stiff and subtly fragrant with everything you did yesterday. But there's no time to change. You stumble to your feet and head outside. It's time to feed the animals. Chores before breakfast are standard. You carry a wooden bucket to the communal livestock pen. Goats bleat at you. Chickens scatter underfoot. A cow eyes you with the suspicion of someone who knows you've never milked anything more complicated than a vending machine. You fill troughs with grain and water, dodging hooves and beaks. Your hands are numb. The sky is still more gray than blue. Somewhere nearby, a child is singing an off-key hymn to their cat. You try to hum along, if only to stay awake. Once the animals are fed, you return to your hut for breakfast. A bowl of cold stew from last night, and another hunk of bread. You don't even sit down. You just lean against the wall and eat slowly, as if the pace will improve the taste. It doesn't. Today's major task: gathering kindling and preparing your part of the communal dinner. You're handed a small axe and a stern warning to avoid cutting off your fingers. You wander toward the woods with a few others, all equally quiet and equally tired. The forest is beautiful in that damp, vaguely threatening way old forests tend to be. You gather branches, break twigs, and stuff your bundle into a woven basket. Your arms tremble from yesterday's labor, but you press on. The idea of a warm fire tonight is the only motivation that still functions. Back in the village, you help start the fires at the communal hearth. Sparks catch. Smoke rises. Someone hands you a handful of leeks. Soup's on. Dinner prep is communal in most villages. Families contribute whatever they have: onions, herbs, beans, questionable roots, and the pot simmers all day. It's a mishmash of flavors, but somehow comforting. Today, there's even a rumor of meat. Not much, just a bone from the Lord's table, but it's enough to make people perk up. As the stew bubbles, people gather. Some sit, some stand, some mend clothes. You patch a hole in your tunic with clumsy stitches. Your fingers are clumsy, but you're learning, slowly. The stew is served with ceremony. The bone gets passed around for sniffing and then dropped back in. The flavor is improved. You eat in silence, savoring every bite of broth-soaked bread. A woman next to you mutters about her neighbor's goat getting into her garden. Someone laughs. Someone else hiccups. It's almost pleasant. Until that is the lice inspection. It happens every few days, informally, but publicly. Someone starts scratching too visibly, and the call goes out. People check each other's scalps with combs and candlelight. You sit still as your head is examined. No judgment, just murmurs. Couple knits, someone says. Could be worse. They dab your neck with vinegar and hand you a comb. You'll do the rest tonight before bed. The fire burns low. Bellies are full, or at least not empty. People drift back to their homes yawning. You help clean the pot scrubbing with a stick and sand. Your hands are raw. Again. You walk home slowly, lantern in hand. The night is quiet save for frogs' wind and distant coughing. Inside your cottage, the air is warmer than usual. The straw mattress feels almost inviting. You lie down, wrap yourself in your cloak, and try not to think about tomorrow. Because tomorrow is exactly the same. The clanging of a bell startles you awake if you can call what you did sleeping. Your body feels like it's been folded and stored under a heavy box. You roll over, blink at the darkness, and try to remember what century it is. Unfortunately, it's still the one with night watch duties and no mattresses. The bell isn't the morning call. It's the night watch summons again. Apparently, your brief nap didn't excuse you from the rotation. You sigh, swing your legs out of bed, and rewrap yourself in your now slightly crispy cloak. Your breath puffs in the air like a lazy ghost. Outside, the village is cloaked in mist and silence. You meet the same companion from last night, his eyes barely open, his mood somehow worse. He grunts, hands you the same knotted staff, and the two of you shuffle toward the outer paths. Your legs ache with every step. Tonight's patrol feels different, colder. The fog clings to your face like damp fabric, and visibility is poor. Every rustle sounds like something bigger than it is. Your partner hums a song under his breath, something about saints and barley, and you try to match the rhythm with your steps. You pause near the mill. The water wheel turns slowly, creaking like a cranky elder. It's eerie at night, this skeletal structure half shrouded in fog. A bat flutters past your ear. You flinch, nearly dropping your staff. Your companion chuckles without looking. Bandits don't usually come twice in a week, he says, which you find only marginally comforting. He scans the horizon. But ghosts, they like to linger. You glance at him. Again, he doesn't explain. Historians still argue how much of medieval law enforcement was practical versus performative. Night patrols were as much about making noise and presence known as they were about real security. You're beginning to suspect the latter. Still, the idea that someone is watching, even badly, can make a would-be thief think twice. You check the barn locks, rattle a few doors, and startle a very angry goose who was apparently sleeping in a basket. It honks furiously and chases you halfway down the lane before losing interest. You pant, lean against a fence, and silently question every choice that led you here. By the time you return to the center of the village, the moon has dipped low. The fires in the hearths are embers. The only light is your torch now sputtering. You rest on the same bench as before, the wood digging into your spine. Your partner offers you another swig from his flask. You decline this time. Your stomach still remembers yesterday. Eventually, the torches are extinguished and the mist begins to lift. It's not dawn yet, but the sky has paled from black to navy. A rooster crows. Another answers. Soon the whole poultry choir joins in. Your watch ends with a nod and a muttered, "Go on, get warm." You return to your hut, open the creaky door, and collapse onto the straw mattress. You don't bother to undress. You don't even wrap yourself properly. But just as your eyes start to close, a bell rings again. This time, it's the real morning bell. You lie there blinking at the ceiling. Here we go again. You don't so much rise as unfold. Every joint creaks, your muscles feel waterlogged, and the straw mattress has impressed its exact shape into your spine. But dawn has broken again, and the animals predictably are louder than your will to resist. You shuffle outside with the grace of a medieval zombie. The sky is still smeared with gray, and the air smells like wet wool and fire smoke. The village is already awake. A woman passes with a bundle of herbs on her back, 2 children trailing behind her like ducklings. A man is butchering a pig on a low bench, steam rising from the carcass like it's still dreaming of escape. Your job this morning isn't glamorous. It rarely is. You start with the goats, milking them with fingers so cold they might shatter. The goat glares at you the entire time. Next, you toss feed to the chickens, who peck at your boots like tiny feathered critics. Finally, you refill water troughs with a yoke and 2 wooden buckets, your shoulders threatening open rebellion. Once the animals are settled, it's time for interior chores. That means sweeping the packed dirt floor of your cottage with a broom made of twigs, dumping the chamber pot with as little eye contact as possible, and trying to fold your one spare tunic into something resembling not on the floor. Afterward, you join a small group gathering outside the church. Not for mass, this is evening prayer prep. As the sun begins to sink, villagers recite chants together, their voices low and lilting. You follow along as best you can, mouthing the Latin syllables like you might remember them from a dream. Then come the door bolts. Every home in the village locks up at night, not because of high crime, but because animals, weather, and restless souls are not to be trusted after sunset. You slide the wooden bolt into place and push a bench up against it just in case. The medieval version of a deadbolt. As darkness falls, you settle by your hearth. A small fire crackles. You've hoarded a few sticks all day just for this. You huddle close, your hands held out to the feeble warmth. There's no dinner tonight, just a bit of bread chewed slowly like it might last longer if you try hard enough. You reach into your belt pouch and pull out your one luxury, a smooth stone, shaped like an egg, worn from years of being handled. You rub it between your fingers. It's not magical, just yours. Historians still argue about how much medieval people feared the night and whether their rituals were based on religious belief or simply survival instincts. But when the fire grows low and the wind howls through the gaps in your shutters, it doesn't really matter. You believe in staying inside. That's enough. Outside, a dog barks. Farther away, a bell rings from a distant village. Someone's still on patrol. Someone else stokes their fire. You hear a lullaby muffled through stone. You whisper a few final words in your own language. Maybe a prayer, maybe a hope, and lie down, wrapping your cloak tight. The darkness presses close. And tomorrow, it will begin again. You jolt awake to the unmistakable sensation of something small and alive scuttling across your arm. You fling the blanket back and sit up, heart pounding. A rat, bold, plump, and wholly uninterested in your panic, disappears behind a pile of firewood. You're left blinking into the darkness, scratching your arm out of instinct, unsure if it actually bit you or just bruised your ego. Welcome to medieval sleep interrupted cold and highly collaborative with vermin. You try to go back to sleep. You shift, pull the cloak tighter, but now every tickle feels like another rat, or worse. The straw mattress rustles ominously. You remind yourself they're just animals. Nothing you haven't dealt with. Nothing, except perhaps the dreams. Sleep in the Middle Ages isn't just bad because of rats. It's bad because of the dark. Darkness here is complete. No street lamps, no glow from a digital clock. Just a suffocating blackness so thick it feels like it might press into your chest. You hear things, branches scraping the roof, the distant bay of a dog, the low moan of wind slipping under your shutters. Or is it wind? People believed in demons, shadowy figures that came in the night sitting on your chest, whispering blasphemies into your ears. You laugh nervously, but then remember, this is also a world where dreams are messages and night air might carry disease. Historians still argue whether these night terrors were purely psychological or tied to environmental realities, spoiled food, poor air, or just the general trauma of being alive in 1350. You roll over trying to find a more comfortable patch of straw. No luck. One clump feels damp, another too lumpy, and the rest is shared space for whatever unseen things choose to nest there. You finally drift back into a half-sleep. You dream, though the content is hazy. Something about a crooked figure in a cassock offering you a turnip with human teeth. You wake up shivering. Your fire has long since died. The hearth glows only faintly with memory. There's no sense of time, no clock to check. Only your body telling you it's still night. You pull your hood over your head and curl in tighter. The floor creaks with a shift in temperature. Outside, a rooster crows far too early, or maybe it never stopped. Eventually, you give up. You sit up, wrap yourself again, and stare at the dim outline of your single cup on the shelf. You think about drinking water, but remember, it might be full of mosquito larvae or ash. You settle for chewing a piece of hard bread. It cracks like gravel. Still better than lying down with your thoughts. You hear a neighbor snoring through the wall, then a baby crying, then silence. Not peaceful silence, but heavy silence. You close your eyes again and try to slow your breathing. And then mercifully, you sleep. Not deeply, Not comfortably, but enough. When next you wake, the horizon is painted with pale gold. You can smell smoke rising faint and distant. Somewhere the communal fire is being stoked. You hear someone sneeze. The chickens rustle. You survived the night, sort of. Now it's time to do it all over again. You awaken stiff and sore, but breathing, and that alone feels like a modest triumph. The day has barely started yet. The sounds of labor already echo through the village firewood being chopped. Animals bleeding water sloshing into buckets. A new morning, indistinguishable from the last. You rise slowly, bones protesting with every movement. Your clothes unchanged from yesterday and the day before now have an impressive collection of wrinkles, soot smudges, and dried vegetable bits. You shake them out, not so much to clean them as to reassure yourself they still qualify as clothing. Outside, the air is sharp, but not cruel. A few faint sunbeams break through the clouds, painting the thatched rooftops with a muted gold. It's almost pleasant if you squint. You fetch water from the well and help an elderly woman carry a bundle of sticks back to her hut. She nods at you a silent thank you, and you realize that kindness here is not rare, just quiet. Breakfast is more of the same leftover porridge, reheated with fresh disappointment. You chew slowly, watching the steam curl upward. Your jaw aches from all the chewing you've done over the last few days. Who knew eating mush could be such a workout? Afterward, it's back to the fields. Same rows, same weeds. Your muscles complain, but your body knows the motions now. You fall into a rhythm ho-pull step, like a grim agricultural dance. A child next to you hums as she works inventing lyrics about worms and potatoes. It's absurd and a little charming. You smile, which surprises you. By midday, you've lost all sense of time. The sun arcs lazily across the sky. You eat a turnip with your hands. No one comments. Later, you're asked to help patch a section of wattle fencing. You're handed twigs and hodging twine and shown how to weave the barrier like a giant basket. It's meditative in a rough-fingered, splinter-gathering sort of way. The man showing you how speaks softly, telling you about a storm from years ago that tore half the village's fencing down. No one slept, he says. We were afraid the goats would riot. You're not sure if he's joking. He doesn't smile. As evening approaches, smoke drifts lazily from chimneys. The village smells like turnips and wood ash. A child chases a goose. A woman laughs and slaps a man's hand away from her pot. The priest's bell rings, summoning everyone to a final prayer. You kneel on the hard ground, chant half-remembered Latin, and wonder if anyone ever feels clean here, not physically, but in the soul. Then it's dinner again. Stew, of course. Fewer turnips this time, more leeks. You eat silently by the fire, and for a moment it feels okay. You step outside one last time. The sky is full of stars, unclouded, brilliant, ancient. The cold is sharp, but the kind that wakes you rather than scolds you. You take a deep breath. It smells of hay smoke, damp wool, and something sweet from a nearby hearth. You survived. Again. And in this world, that's everything. The fire fades slowly tonight. You're wrapped in your cloak, the last flickers dancing across the cottage walls like ancient shadows. The wind outside has stilled. Even the chickens are quiet, their murmurs soft beneath the thatch. You pull the wool tighter around your shoulders and lie back the straw mattress, more forgiving now than it was last night. Or maybe you've simply grown too tired to notice. Outside, the world dims. A hush has fallen over the village, like a collective sigh at the end of another endless day. The stars blink patiently in the inky sky. The goats are fed, the buckets emptied, the fire stoked one last time. And here you are, safe, still warm enough. Your eyes grow heavier as the silence deepens. Every creak of the rafters, every breath from the coals is part of an ancient lullaby. This is how they slept hundreds of years ago, worn down, full of turnips, surrounded by darkness and dreams. Somehow they woke again, and so will you. Let the flicker fade. Let the night settle like dust. You've earned this quiet. Sleep well, time traveler. Your eyes grow heavier as the silence deepens. Every creak of the rafters, every breath from the coals is part of an ancient lullaby. This is how they slept hundreds of years ago, worn down, full of turnips, surrounded by darkness and dreams. Somehow, they woke again, and so will you. Let the flicker fade. Let the night settle like dust. You've earned this quiet. Sleep well, time traveler. But what if you didn't wake up here? What if instead of dawn breaking over muddy rooftops, you opened your eyes to a world locked in ice, with no roofs, no roads, no warmth, just mammoths, snow, and a fire that never sleeps? Let's go even further back. Welcome to the Ice Age. You wake up, not to the sound of an alarm, but the echoing grunt of a reindeer herd in the distance, and the low murmur of your small clan huddled nearby. The cold is a constant pressure, a weight on your chest. You're wrapped in layered furs, reindeer wolf, even a touch of squirrel, and still the air nips any skin left uncovered. Outside, the world is white, but not soft and fluffy, like the snow in modern postcards. It's crunchy, windswept, the kind that stings your eyes. The sun hangs low and pale, offering more light than heat. There's no such thing as indoors. You slept in a crude structure formed from mammoth bones and covered in hides like a forgotten fort built by giants. Already, someone is tending the fire, coaxing flame from embers, protected all night under a mound of ash. Fire isn't just comfort, it's survival. Without it, there's no warmth, no cooked food, no light after dusk. Keeping it going is a sacred duty. If it goes out, you're not starting over with matches. You're rubbing sticks or striking flint, hoping the dry moss catches before frostbite does. You shuffle toward the smoke, grateful for even a few degrees of difference. Your breath clouds the air in fat puffs. Someone hands you a hunk of frozen meat, last night's leftover aurochs, slightly singed, slightly raw. But your teeth don't mind. Eating cold meat for breakfast is a luxury compared to chewing on dried roots or half-frozen berries. Around you, life stirs slowly. There's no rush. Hurrying leads to accidents, and accidents are dangerous when the nearest healer is a grandmother with bone needles and a vague idea of herbs. People stretch, check the hides, tend to children, glance at the sky with practiced suspicion. A giant shadow moves in the distance, a woolly mammoth, likely majestic and oblivious. They're the titans of this world. And also, dinner, if you're lucky, skilled, and just a little desperate. But today isn't a hunting day, at least not yet. The elder mutters something about the wind direction and gestures toward the west. The clan might move soon. Camping too long in one place risks exposure predators, or simply running out of things to burn. You've already used up the nearby brushwood. Now, it's dung and splintered bone keeping the fire alive. As you crouch near the heat, scraping frost from your boots, you notice the tiny details of your surroundings. The delicate carvings on a bone pendant, the patterned stitches on someone's leggings, the way smoke curls lazily toward the roof hole. Despite the brutal setting, there's beauty here, intentionality, community. Historians still argue whether Ice Age humans thought of themselves as artists or just made things to pass time. But one look at the etchings on cave walls or the carefully shaped flutes made from bird bones suggests a hunger for more than mere survival. Maybe they dreamed like you do. Maybe they told stories as the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. Someone laughs a rare warm sound, and you realize it's not all doom and struggle. There's camaraderie and shared hardship humor. In disaster, narrowly avoided a kind of gruff love in the way one clan member tosses a fur blanket toward a shivering friend. You shift your weight bones popping and glance toward the edge of camp. The world awaits vast and indifferent, an expanse of ice and possibility. You blink into the pale morning light and stretch your limbs stiff from a night spent curled on frozen ground. Around you, the camp begins to stir, more purposefully now. There's a quiet coordination in the way people move. Efficient, deliberate, like dancers in a slow, silent ballet. You rub your hands together, not just to warm them, but to stimulate circulation. Numb fingers are dangerous fingers. You need them intact, especially today, because there's talk of heading out to check the traps. And when you live in the Ice Age, meat isn't just food. It's currency. It's clothing. It's glue tools and string. Everything begins with the hunt. As you make your way through the icy terrain, you pass mammoth tusks arranged like gateposts, a marker left by another group, or maybe a warning. Historians still argue whether such arrangements were ceremonial, territorial, or just good structural engineering. Whatever their purpose, they make the hairs on your neck rise. Your group is careful not to waste energy. You follow frozen riverbeds, the paths of least resistance, and keep an eye out for tracks. Occasionally, someone kneels to examine a print large rounded depressions mean bison or deer. Smaller, lighter ones might mean rabbit or fox. The holy grail, though, is the mammoth. Towering, shaggy, and deceptively peaceful, they carry the promise of enough meat and material to sustain a group for weeks. You reach a spot where the snow has been packed down and discolored. A kill site from earlier this season, maybe. You can still smell it. A blend of blood rot and snow. It's not unpleasant, exactly, just raw, honest. The traps today hold modest offerings: a snow hare, a half-frozen grouse, and one particularly aggressive weasel that tries to bite even in death. The clan's hunter, a woman with arms like braided rope, grunts her approval. It's not a feast, but it's food. You sling the hare over your shoulder and wonder, as always, what the next meal will be. It's not just about calories, though you burn through those like kindling. It's about keeping the group strong enough to move, think, and survive. Cold saps your strength like a leaking wineskin, and without protein, people start to falter. Back at camp, the grouse is already roasting over the fire, its feathers scattered like confetti around the hearth. Someone is scraping the hare's hide, and you notice how efficient their hands are. There's no waste. Every tendon, every scrap of fur will be used. Nearby, a few children chase each other around the perimeter, laughing despite the chill. One of them drags a stick through the snow, tracing wobbly lines. A dog-like creature, more wolf than pet pads, behind them cautiously. It's half wild, half family, tolerated for its ears and its loyalty. You sit by the fire, again, gnawing on a charred bone, and gaze across the camp. The mammoth hide shelters flap lazily in the breeze. Smoke snakes upward in lazy spirals. A few people have begun crafting. One is sharpening a flint blade, another threading sinew through a fur sleeve. Did they feel bored, these Ice Age ancestors of yours? Or did the constant pressure to survive leave no room for ennui? Maybe chipping at a rock for hours was soothing, meditative even, like your version of scrolling. Historians still argue whether the division of labor in Ice Age communities was strictly gendered or more fluid than we once thought. There's growing evidence of female hunters, male caregivers, and plenty of overlap. Today, the group works together as a single organism, less concerned with labels than with function. You hear a low rumble in the distance. Not thunder, something heavier. A herd may be shifting its weight on the plain. Everyone freezes, listening. Sound carries strangely here. The snow muffles some frequencies and amplifies others. You strain to identify the source heart thudding a little faster, but it fades. False alarm, or perhaps the herd is miles off. Still, the tension lingers in the air. Life here is balanced on a knife edge, and the wind is always pushing. Back near the fire, someone pulls out a length of twisted sinew and begins to braid. Others sharpen spears or examine the leather cords binding their snowshoes. Even rest is productive. You wipe your knife clean and tuck it into your belt, the familiar weight comforting. For a brief moment, the sun pokes through the clouds, a weak, silvery spotlight. It casts long shadows and glints off your companion's furs. The world looks ancient and untouched, like the first day of time. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with crisp air and the smoky scent of cooking meat. It's not much, but it's enough. For now. The sun doesn't climb much higher. It's more of a lazy arc across the sky than a true rise. But with its presence comes the promise of the day's main event, your Ice Age breakfast. Well, breakfast is a generous term. There's no porridge, no eggs, no hot drink, unless someone's figured out how to make pine needle tea without it tasting like regret. You sit cross-legged near the fire as someone passes you a warmed stone wrapped in hide, your makeshift hand warmer and bowl in one. On it rests a chunk of dried meat, a smear of rendered fat, and what may or may not be a partially frozen root. You chew slowly, jaw working against the toughness. There's no such thing as picky eating here. Taste is functional. Everything is salted, smoked, or fermented to prevent it from going off, sometimes to questionable success. The fatty smear is surprisingly satisfying, and you find yourself licking your fingers despite the slight tang of age. It's not about indulgence. It's about survival. Calories are a form of currency, and in this economy, fat is gold. Nearby, Two clan members are haggling gently, with grunts and gestures, over who gets the last sliver of marrow from a cracked femur. You'd laugh, but you're too focused on your own ration. That marrow could mean the difference between making it to midday or feeling your fingers go numb again. You tear a strip of dried meat and chew until your jaw protests. It's sinewy flavored, more by the fire's smoke than any seasoning. Still, it gives you something to do. The act of chewing, of gnawing, becomes its own kind of meditation. A child toddles by, clutching a bone spoon smudged with something brown and suspiciously glossy. You're momentarily jealous. Maybe they got the honey stash, or maybe it's mashed acorns. You don't ask. Better not to know. For a moment, you stare into the fire. The flames lick upward in lazy spirals, casting dancing shadows on the shelter walls. One of the elders sits cross-legged chewing with slow reverence. He's been through more winters than you can count. His beard is more ice than hair at this point. Every so often, he mutters to himself half prayer, half weather prediction. Historians still argue whether such mutterings were early meteorology or just rambling wisdom. Either way, everyone listens. Once the eating slows, there's a moment of quiet. People lean back, stretch limbs, rub sore shoulders. Someone begins to hum low and rhythmic. It's not a song you recognize, but it feels old, like it's always existed. The kind of melody that could warm your bones if you let it. You glance at the surrounding landscape, white and gray with streaks of shadow where the snow dips into frozen ruts. Trees, if you're lucky to have any nearby, are leafless and gnarled like skeletal fingers reaching up in protest. Food doesn't grow here. It must be tracked, caught scraped, or begged from the earth with persistence and a bit of pleading. You wonder what it would be like to have fruit again, or bread, or just something with crunch that isn't an unchewed tendon. But those thoughts are dangerous. They make your stomach feel hollow in a different way. Instead, you focus on the next task, digging out a cache. Somewhere beneath the snow, wrapped in hide and frozen solid, are emergency supplies. If wolves didn't find it first, if it didn't rot despite the cold. You take a carved stick and begin probing the ground like a cautious archaeologist. Eventually, you hit something dense. You scrape and pull until a bundle emerges inside a lump of smoked fish and a few withered berries. The others cheer softly. Not a feast, but a success. Someone tosses you a grin. In this world, a good breakfast means not being hungrier than yesterday. You bite into a piece of fish and let the oil coat your lips. It's cold, it's tough, but it's nourishing. And in a place where the wind never stops howling and the world is always trying to freeze you solid, that's all that matters. You've eaten what passes for breakfast, warmed your hands on fire-warmed rocks, and now it's time to figure out where to hunker down for the next chill. The phrase, "go inside," doesn't mean what it does in the modern world. There are no doors to close, no walls to block out the wind. You live in a landscape where shelter is something you create with patience, ingenuity, and a profound appreciation for mammoths. You look around the camp, assessing the dwellings. Your own is a circular hut made from mammoth bones, rib bones, mostly curved into a dome and lashed together with sinew. Over this skeleton are layers of hide stitched so tightly they hold out the worst of the wind. Still, windproof is a relative term when the average breeze could knock over a horse. The inside of your shelter is cramped but communal. You share it with 5 others. Bodies serve as insulation. If you sleep too far from someone else, you risk frostbite. Cuddling is not optional. The floor is packed earth covered in rushes skins and one flattened bear skin that someone insists is good luck. You're less sure. There's a faint smell of fish that won't go away, but you say nothing. Superstition keeps morale up, and in this climate, that's almost as important as fire. Not everyone in your group is lucky enough to have a permanent shelter. Some are still sleeping in lean-tos branches and hides slung together like a last-minute school project. When the wind changes, they flap like laundry. One poor soul is still trying to dig a semi-subterranean pit, hoping the ground will be warmer than the air. It won't be. You remember the first time you saw a real Ice Age shelter. A big one, ringed with tusks and decorated with bones carved into the shapes of animals. The entrance had a windbreak of piled stones, and inside the fire pit was sunken perfectly centered. It felt safe, like the belly of some great beast curled against the cold. Historians still argue whether these shelters were always communal or if some were built for specific families or elders. Judging by how often you wake up with someone else's elbow in your ribs, privacy wasn't a top priority. You gather some snow-dusted moss and begin to plug the gaps in your hut's ceiling. Wind sneaks in through every crack, and last night a fine dusting of frost formed on your eyelashes while you slept. You'd brushed it off without waking. Your body has learned to sleep through anything but silence. Shelter isn't just about walls. It's about warmth. You stoke the fire carefully, using twisted dung and dry grass. Wood is rare here. Trees don't grow tall in frozen soil. You remember the last time someone found driftwood along the river. It was treated like treasure, used to make a ceremonial carving instead of burned. Firewood comes from bones now. The smell of burning marrow is distinct. Someone nearby is fixing their own structure, tightening sinew cords, repositioning hides. You help because helping means surviving. There's no individualism here. A collapsed roof is everyone's problem because it means someone might freeze, and a frozen clan member is a drain on already limited energy. You walk past a half-finished hut. The young couple building it are arguing softly. Not about the design, about who gets to sleep closer to the fire. Romance, Ice Age style. The stakes are higher when you're sleeping on the couch, means exposure and potential death. As you duck into your own shelter, you notice the little comforts people have tried to add. A carved figurine in the corner, worn smooth by handling. Beads strung from a jawbone, gently swaying in the breeze. Someone's even painted faint symbols in ochre on the inside wall. A line of animals, or maybe people marching across the hide. You don't know what they mean. Maybe they don't mean anything. Maybe they're just there, like art on a fridge, a reminder that you're human even when the world tries to strip that away. For now, the shelter holds. The wind howls, but it doesn't win. You tuck your legs under your fur wrap, close your eyes for just a second, and listen to the sounds of your temporary precious home creaking softly against the Ice Age. Despite the biting cold and ever-present dangers, one thing hasn't changed since the dawn of humanity. People still get bored. After breakfast, and with the wind too fierce for serious hunting, you and the others are left to kill time without. Of course, the benefit of books, screens, or even a decent game of cards. This is where the real challenge of the Ice Age begins: how to not die of sheer boredom. You sit cross-legged near the fire, watching an elder carve a piece of antler with the kind of focus normally reserved for surgery. He's shaping it into a pendant, maybe, or the handle of a tool. The lines are delicate, the movement slow. You lean in to watch. It's mesmerizing, not because of what it is, but because of what it represents: patience. Not far off, a younger woman hums softly while pounding dried herbs into a powder. The song has no words. It's rhythmic, hypnotic. It blends with the soft whoosh of the wind and the crackle of the fire until it feels like background music to a world frozen in time. Entertainment takes many forms here. Some people carve, others sew. One particularly ambitious soul is threading beads made from snail shells onto a strand of sinew. It's intricate work, requiring steady hands and decent lighting, neither of which are guaranteed. But the results are lovely, and the process passes the time. There's storytelling too. Someone starts one without preamble, just launches into a tale of a giant bear, with eyes like moons and breath of smoke. Everyone knows it's fiction. Probably. But no one interrupts. The story is the warmth, the chuckles that ripple through the group, the exaggerated gestures, the ridiculous voices. It's theater without a stage. You contribute a joke of your own, poorly delivered, involving a mammoth, a fire pit, and a badly aimed spear. It earns a few groans and one legitimate laugh, which feels like winning the lottery. Historians still argue whether humor was a core part of Ice Age communication or simply a byproduct of storytelling. Judging by the twinkle in the elder's eyes as he mimics a bison's confused grunt, you'd bet on the former. Someone starts tapping a rhythm on a hollowed bone using 2 sticks. Another joins in with a clap. Soon a few of you are drumming together, heads bobbing, boots tapping. It's primal, yes, but also joyful. You feel your pulse sync with the beat, and for a few moments, the cold seems distant. Not everyone is drumming, of course. Some sit in quiet meditation, staring into the fire as if it might offer answers. One person is braiding rope. Another is sharpening tools occasionally, pausing to test the edge against a thumbnail. And then there are the gossipers. You edge closer to their huddle, pretending to fix a strap on your leg wrap. The whispers are deliciously mundane: who has a new hide robe, who caught someone sneaking extra berries, who's been eyeing the hunter with the best spear throw. Romance, jealousy, pride. Nothing changes. One person swears they saw a saber-tooth shadowing the camp last night. Another insists it was just a trick of the moonlight. The debate is heated but friendly, and everyone has an opinion. You listen, contribute, and wonder if they're talking about you when you're not around. You drift from group to group like a bee among wildflowers. There's something calming about the rhythm of life here, the way even boredom is handled communally with a shrug and a shared joke. A child offers you a carved toy, a reindeer maybe, or a particularly lopsided dog. You accept it with mock seriousness, turning it over in your hands. It's charming in its imperfections. The child beams. You resist the urge to ruffle their fur cap. It's probably full of lice. Later, someone proposes a contest: who can throw a stick the furthest without falling over on the ice. You join because why not? Your first throw is embarrassingly short. The second ends with you flat on your back, staring up at a sky so pale it's nearly white. The laughter is warm, not cruel. Eventually, the sun dips just enough to turn the snow lavender. The games wind down. The gossip quiets. Someone rekindles the fire, and the group drifts closer together again. The day is still long, but you filled it with enough small joys to make the cold feel almost optional. Almost. There's a particular kind of pride that comes with getting dressed in the Ice Age, not because of personal style exactly, but because surviving fashion is literal fashion. Your outfit today: full primal couture reindeer hide tunic, fox fur boots, and mittens sewn from the inner lining of a mammoth's stomach. You are in short, absolutely slaying. And also, you're warm. Dressing for 30 degrees is less about trends and more about physics. Layering is everything. You've got inner wraps of softened leather, mid layers of tanned fur, and an outermost cloak that smells faintly of smoked animal and hard labor. There are no zippers, of course. Everything ties tucks or is fastened with bone toggles. You've become shockingly dexterous at knots. Your boots are the real MVP. Lined with grass or moss, depending on what you gathered last week, they're waterproof-ish and thick enough to keep your toes. Losing toes is not fashionable. Losing toes is what happens when you skip the moss. You've learned that lesson. You still have all 10, but you've seen others who don't. Nearby, someone is stitching a new hood. Bone, needle, sinew thread, careful fingers. It's a slow, quiet craft. Sewing is as vital as hunting here, and far more forgiving on the knees. Historians still argue whether women monopolized garment making or if everyone sewed as needed. Judging by the intensity with which your burliest clanmate is hemming a sleeve, the answer might be whoever's best at it. You run a hand over your tunic, checking the seams. A small tear has formed near the hip, probably from your last venture through thorny brush. You make a mental note to patch it. Exposed skin is an invitation not just to the cold, but to insects and infection. The latter is worse than frostbite. In many ways, at least frostbite is predictable. Ornamentation does exist. You see it in the way someone has beaded their belt with tiny carved bones, or in the dyed fringe on a child's cap. The dye comes from crushed berries or iron-rich clay. The results are muted, rusty reds, pale yellows, but striking against the whites and grays of winter. Your clan's elder has an elaborate fur collar that looks more decorative than practical. It puffs around his neck like a shaggy throne, and he wears it like a badge of honor. Maybe it is. Maybe it signals wisdom or status, or just that he once got lucky and killed a very fat wolf. You tug on your hood and tighten the strap under your chin. The wind is picking up again. A stray gust sneaks down your back and makes you shiver. There's always one weak point in any outfit. One tiny breach where the elements win. Today, it's your neck. Still, you're better off than you were last year. You remember those nights wrapped in little more than stitched together rabbit pelts, praying the fire would last till dawn. Now, you've upgraded to full mammoth layering, and the difference is night and day. You notice someone repairing their snow mask, a piece of bark or bone worn over the eyes with tiny slits to reduce glare. Snow blindness is a very real risk, and the sun, when it reflects off endless white, can scald your retinas like a bad decision in July. Underneath it all, there's sweat. You're always a bit damp. a bit sticky, even in the cold. Movement builds heat, but your clothes trap it. You've learned to vent. Open a seam. Lift a flap fan yourself with a flattened hide. Too hot is dangerous. Sweat freezes. Frostbitten armpits are not a badge of honor. And yet, with all this bundled bulk, movement is still possible. You've seen dances performed in full winter gear. You've climbed hills, crawled through caves, even run from wolves, all without shedding layers. The trick is to know your clothes like you know your own limbs. As you help a child adjust their hood, tying the string, just so, you realize how much knowledge lives in these outfits. How many generations of trial and error it took to get to this particular arrangement of fox fur, elk leather, and human ingenuity. You glance at the rest of the camp. Everyone is wrapped, bundled, layered, adorned. It's not high fashion by modern standards, but it's a kind of uniform, a shared statement that says we're still here, still warm, still standing. And in the Ice Age, that's the only look that matters. Hunting in the Ice Age isn't just a task. It's a ritual, a performance, and a group therapy session with incredibly high stakes. Today, the mammoth signs are too clear to ignore. Churned snow, snapped branches steaming dung so fresh it might still be radiating heat. The elders nod, the hunters sharpen their flints, and you regret your breakfast choices. You begin with preparation. Every spear is checked and rechecked. They're long-tipped with flint or bone, sometimes barbed. Some in the group carry throwing sticks at ladles designed to give the spear more distance and force. It's low-tech physics, but brilliant. You grab yours, feeling the familiar groove where your fingers fit. It's like shaking hands with a very sharp friend. The wind is with you. That's good. It'll carry your scent away from the prey. Your group moves like shadows across the snow. Quiet, deliberate eyes scanning the horizon. The landscape offers little cover, just scraggly trees. The occasional boulder, maybe a drift big enough to hide behind if you squint and pray. And then you see them, mammoths, a whole herd woolly and massive grazing just beyond a ridge. They move like glaciers, slow, unbothered, powerful. You've seen them before, but their scale still staggers you. Even the calves are as big as oxen, and the adults tower like walking barns. You can hear the crunch of their steps, the low rumble of their calls, the flapping of those enormous leathery ears. The plan is simple: confuse them. Isolate one, preferably old or injured, and drive it into a trap. Simple, of course, is a relative term. Your group fans out. One hunter breaks off to circle wide. Another signals 2 fingers downward motion. That means approach low. You nod, heart thumping, and begin to creep forward through the snow, hoping you remembered to silence every jingle and rustle. Historians still argue whether Ice Age hunters used vocal cues or purely gestures during the approach. In your experience, a grunt means hurry, and a hiss means shut up or we all die. Suddenly it begins. A shout, a flurry of movement, and the mammoths spook. They trumpet in unison, a sound that vibrates through your ribs, and begin to shuffle and run. Snow sprays. The ground trembles. You sprint, dodging between rocks, aiming to steer one toward the kill zone, a narrow pass between 2 slopes. There, one lags behind. A male older limping slightly. Perfect. Your group tightens. Spears raise. The mammoth turns, swings its head, trumpets a challenge. For a second, you're convinced it's going to charge. Your mouth goes dry. Your legs want to turn to soup, but the others move in flanking, shouting, waving furs. The mammoth backs away, stumbles. A spear flies. It hits not deep, but enough to sting. Another follows. Blood blooms against shaggy fur. You step forward, aim, throw, and your spear catches it in the shoulder. The beast lets out a groan, like a dying storm, and collapses with a thunderous crash. Silence. Then, a collective exhale. You approach carefully. No one wants a surprise stomp. But it's down, truly down. The kill is made. What follows is strangely reverent. There are no whoops or dances, just murmured thanks, gentle touches to the animal's hide and the quiet work of butchering. Every part will be used: meat for eating, bones for tools, sinew for thread, hide for tents and coats. Even the dung might become fire fuel. Nothing is wasted. Someone begins slicing the meat into manageable chunks. Others dig into the snow to create storage pits. You help lift a heavy slab onto a makeshift sled. It's exhausting, bloody work. Your hands are sticky and cold. Your arms ache, but there's pride in it too. You glance at your companions, faces smeared with blood and ash eyes gleaming with fatigue and victory. For a moment, you feel something ancient, an unshakable connection, purpose, place. Historians still debate how often Ice Age communities made kills this large, but when they did, it shaped everything. Calendar, ceremony, survival. You walk back to camp, slowly, sled dragging behind you, the air thick with the scent of blood and snow. Tonight, you'll feast. Tomorrow, you'll rest. And someday, someone might carve a tiny figure of today's hunt and hide it in a cave. But for now, you just want to wash your hands. Back at camp, your hands are still sticky with blood and bits of fat clinging under your nails. You've wiped them on snow, on fur, on the nearest hide flap, but the scent lingers. You smell like survival, like victory, and most notably, like wet wolf fur, soaked in mammoth grease. Welcome to Ice Age hygiene. The idea of bathing is a loose concept here. There's water, yes, frozen, crusted with ice, or moving in sluggish streams that threaten to swallow limbs whole. But there's no soap, no scented lotions, and certainly no heated bathhouses. Washing is optional. Dangerous even. Strip down too far, and the cold will slap you into the next dimension. So instead, you do what everyone else does. You try your best not to smell too much worse than your neighbors. This is achieved through a combination of snow scrubs, smoke fumigation, and liberal use of pungent animal fat as both moisturizer and body barrier. It's as glamorous as it sounds. You crouch by the edge of a stream, breaking through the crusted ice with a stick. The water is so cold, it bites. You scoop a handful and splash your face. Immediate regret. Your skin seizes, your breath catches. It's invigorating in the way being chased by a saber-tooth might be memorable, terrible, oddly exhilarating. Nearby, a woman is combing her hair with a bone pick. You envy her discipline. Your own hair is tied back in what you generously call a knot, but others might identify as a fur-snarled disaster. Still, no one judges. Grooming is a personal battle, not a community expectation. Clothing is rarely washed. It's too precious, too hard to dry. Instead, garments are smoked. You hang your cloak near the fire, letting the smoke creep into every fiber. It masks the scent of sweat and blood with the equally strong scent of burning mammoth dung. Some say it adds character. Historians still argue whether Ice Age communities prioritize cleanliness or just endured the funk. Based on your current state, the answer is yes. You notice someone scrubbing their teeth with a twig dipped in ash. It's not dental floss, but it gets the job done. You try the same, grinding the ash between your molars. It's gritty and bitter, but your mouth feels marginally fresher afterward, or at least not worse. There's a communal scent to the camp smoke fur meat and something vaguely tangy that might be fermented berries or unwashed socks. You've stopped noticing it most of the time. It's like breathing in your own blanket, comforting, if not exactly pleasant. You attempt a quick, under-the-arm wipe with a snowball. It's effective in a masochistic way. Your skin tingles afterward, and you briefly consider if that's frostbite or just misplaced pride. There are no mirrors, of course. Your reflection exists only in puddles or polished bone. You glimpse yourself in the stream's surface, wind-burned cheeks, dirt-smeared forehead, eyes rimmed with smoke. You look wild. You look like you belong. You head back to the main fire where someone's trimming nails with a flint chip. Another is plucking lice from their companion's scalp with the care of a jeweler. Lice are a fact of life here, a personal ecosystem. You scratch your own scalp absent-mindedly and try not to think about it too hard. Still, there's pride in keeping clean by Ice Age standards. You run a comb through your hair once, twice, and shake out the worst of the tangles. You rub snow on your hands again, pat your cheeks, dry with a scrap of rabbit fur, and straighten your cloak. You're not fresh, you're not fragrant, but you're tidy for now. You sit by the fire steaming slightly and lean back with a sigh. The day may be dirty, but in this moment, you feel oddly pristine. A creature of earth and ice scrubbed by nature itself. And yes, you still smell like wet wolf fur. But so does everyone else. In a world where everything is cold, sharp, and frequently trying to kill you, one might assume love and marriage would be low on the list of priorities. But Ice Age humans were in their own flinty way hopeless romantics, or at least deeply invested in not dying alone. You wake up to the gentle sounds of a couple arguing about fur storage. It's oddly comforting. Their voices are low affectionate even in disagreement. You watch as they rearrange bundles of hide together, their movements practiced and oddly synchronized. This is what passes for intimacy. Here, shared chores, shared warmth, shared mosquito bites. Partnerships in the Ice Age aren't arranged with lavish ceremonies or diamond rings. They're formed through survival logic. If you can share food without trying to steal the last bite, if you don't elbow each other in your sleep, if your combined skills mean fewer near-death experiences, congratulations, you're a perfect match. Still, it's not just utility. People form bonds, real ones. You've seen it in the way one person automatically saves the last bite for another, or the way a partner will carve a tiny figurine resembling their beloved's crooked nose. You've even seen the quiet, devastating grief when someone doesn't return from a hunt. Romance happens in glances over a shared fire, in the lending of a particularly soft fur, in whispered stories during long nights, and yes, sometimes in the gifting of bones carved into suggestive shapes. You pretend not to notice, but the meaning is clear, and the recipient always blushes under the grime. Historians still argue how formalized Ice Age unions were. Were there rituals, exchanges of goods, announcements? You've heard of symbolic gestures, hand fasting, shared hunting tools, even tattoos, but it's unclear how official these acts were. What is clear? Love exists, and it survives even here. You remember one pairing from another camp, a woman who sang like running water, and a man who couldn't throw a spear to save his life. They were inseparable. She hunted, he sewed, and together they formed a surprisingly effective micro-society. She used to joke that he was her decorative pouch, useless but adorable. Children, too, are often part of the partnership equation. If not yours, then someone's. Ice Age. Parenting is a community affair. If two people can keep small, slippery humans alive through winter, that's a stronger bond than any priest could offer. You sit next to a couple who are weaving a net together. Their hands move in unison like a dance. They joke quietly occasionally, touching elbows. It's unspoken, but obvious. This is connection. This is trust. There are breakups, too. One person packs their things. A pouch, a carving. A chunk of dried meat mutters a few words and moves to another shelter. No legal documents, just cold shoulders and new sleeping arrangements. It's awkward for a few days, then everyone moves on. You once asked an elder how you know when someone's the one. He'd grunted, scratched his chin, and said, "When you still want to share a fire with them after they fart into it." Sound advice. Romance isn't always tender. Sometimes it's loud, chaotic, full of eye rolls and sarcastic grunts. But it's real. It's in the way someone patches a hole in their partner's leggings without being asked, or the way they share the choicest bit of marrow without making a show of it. Marriage, if it exists, is an agreement born of mutual benefit and emotional endurance. There are no cakes, but there might be shared flint tools. No rings, but maybe matching tooth pendants. And instead of a honeymoon, you get to go hunting together and maybe not die. As the day wanes, you see a couple curl up together near the fire, their cloaks pulled over both heads, their laughter muffled and private. You smile, shift closer to the warmth, and think even in an age of ice, the human heart hasn't changed much. Nightfall in the Ice Age doesn't sneak in. It stomps down like a mammoth in a bad mood. 1 minute, the sun is a pale smudge in the sky, and the next, darkness spreads over the snow like spilled ink. Cold air presses in from all sides, and suddenly sleep seems both necessary and mildly terrifying. You settle into your fur pile, curling close to whoever's already lying down. Sleeping alone is not a brave choice. It's a foolish one. Heat is communal. Bodies are blankets. If you're lucky, someone warm and quiet sidles next to you. If you're unlucky, it's that one snorer who sounds like a dying bison. The shelter groans in the wind. The fire pops and hisses. Outside, the world crackles and creaks as the cold tightens its grip. Somewhere not too far off, a wolf howls a long rising note, that slices through the night like a bone knife through marrow. You freeze. Wolves are a nightly concern. They circle, they wait, they test your perimeter. Most nights they don't attack, but most isn't all. That's why spears rest near every bedroll. Why one person always stays half awake, eyes flickering open at the slightest sound. You try to close your own eyes, willing yourself toward sleep, but your mind races. Every creak could be a paw. Every shadow could move. You bury your face deeper into your furs, breathing in the scent of smoke and sweat and a faint trace of pine. Historians still argue whether prehistoric people truly feared wolves or if they saw them as spiritual cousins, companions in the hunt, rivals in the dark. Some clans may have even kept wolf pups as early companions. You've seen it yourself. Half-wild dogs that linger near the camp, tolerated for their warning growls and flea-ridden loyalty. Still, when one howls under a full moon, it's hard not to clutch your spear just a little tighter. Sleep comes in fits. You drift off, only to wake moments later, heart pounding. Maybe you dreamed of falling through ice, or maybe you heard a twig snap. Someone nearby mutters in their sleep. Another shifts, pulling furs tighter. One child lets out a soft half-whimper. Their parent soothes them with a hand on the back, a low hum that feels older than language. Sometimes the cold wakes you. You roll to find a warmer spot or edge closer to the fire. You stretch out your feet toward the embers, hoping not to scorch your soles. The fire's glow flickers on the curved walls of your shelter, casting silhouettes that look like animals, ghosts, or gods, depending on your level of sleep deprivation. You once heard a story told during a night like this of a spirit that wandered the snow, testing doors and sniffing for warmth. If it found you awake, it'd leave. If you were asleep, it might crawl in beside you. The teller had chuckled darkly, but the silence afterward was not comfortable. In this moment, you understand why so many cultures consider sleep a sacred state, a kind of death practice. You surrender to the unknown, to darkness, to dreams, to the quiet hum of your own breath amid the shifting groans of the world. A breeze sneaks through a gap in the wall, brushing your cheek with icy fingers. You adjust your wrap grumble and press closer to the person beside you. They grumble too. You both settle again. Outside, another howl, this one answered by a second fainter voice. The pack is calling. You hope they're far enough away. Hope the bones from the day's kill are keeping them occupied. You drift off again, this time into a deeper, heavier sleep. You dream of warmth, of endless, fur-lined tunnels, of running with wolves instead of from them. And just before morning light dares to return, you wake one last time to silence. The wolves are gone. The fire is low. And you, against all odds, are still here. If there's one thing more unpredictable than the weather in the Ice Age, it's children. Small, loud, endlessly curious, and perpetually sticky, they are both a joy and a danger magnet. And keeping them alive, that's not just parenting. It's a full-time, multi-generational crisis management team. You're jolted from your half-sleep by the sound of a tiny voice shrieking with glee, followed immediately by the unmistakable thud of a body hitting snow. One of the younger ones has discovered that sliding down a frozen slope on a flattened piece of hide is both thrilling and potentially concussive. You admire the enthusiasm. You question the survival instinct. Parenting here isn't about helicoptering. It's about calculated neglect. Children are allowed to explore, to fall, to figure things out. You stop short of letting them poke a fire with their bare hands, but beyond that, trial and error is the day's curriculum. You watch as a mother ties a baby to her back with a strip of hide and continues sewing like it's no big deal. The child gurgles, drools, and occasionally bites her shoulder. She doesn't flinch. Her hands keep moving. Children are expected to contribute early. They fetch sticks, scatter bones, chase birds, and on particularly useful days, spot danger. One 5-year-old once saved the camp from a wandering bear by screaming so loudly it scared both the animal and the rest of you. They're also extremely efficient at making messes. A trio is currently dismantling a carefully stacked pile of tinder, apparently convinced it hides a secret treasure. You tell them to stop. They ignore you. You tell them again. One sticks out a tongue. You consider throwing a snowball. You reconsider. Historians still argue about the exact roles children played in Ice Age societies. Some believe they were miniature adults expected to work early and hard. Others suggest they had designated play spaces, specific toys, and a more protected existence. Judging by the reindeer scapula, one kid is using as a sled. The answer seems to be a bit of both. Discipline is more community-based than individual. If a child misbehaves, any adult can correct them. If a child excels, everyone praises them. You once watched an entire clan clap for a toddler who managed to spit out a berry pit without choking. The encouragement was heartfelt, possibly excessive. But hey, it's the Ice Age. Celebrations are few and far between. You help a child tie their fur boot properly. It's the 10th time today. Their hands are too small, too clumsy. But they try again and again, face scrunched with concentration. You pat their head. They bite your wrist in gratitude. You remind yourself they're still learning. Some kids are already practicing hunting, small game of course. They chase snow hares with enthusiastic lunges, laugh when they fall, scream when they almost succeed. One particularly fearless girl caught a weasel last week. She now carries the tail as a trophy and insists on being called Weasel Queen. You support this energy. Illness and injury are constant threats. A minor cut can become infected. A cough, if untreated, can sweep through the whole camp. Children are watched closely, cuddled often, and fed the best bits when food is scarce. A healthy child is hope. A sick child is everyone's concern. There's education too, just not in the way you'd recognize. Kids learn by watching, by mimicking. A child might sit for hours next to an elder, copying their every move. You once saw a 3-year-old attempt to nap Flint. They failed spectacularly, but the intent was there. So was the bandage. Stories are passed down as lessons. Fables about animals, about spirits, about ancestors who got too greedy or too lazy. Kids remember the ones with fart jokes best, but the wisdom sinks in anyway. By afternoon, the smaller ones are napping in a warm pile of furs, limbs tangled, drool pooling on hides. The older ones are arguing about who saw the most exciting footprint today. You referee with a firm, all tracks are good tracks, and they accept it like gospel. You realize then that despite the cold, the wolves, the constant scraping against extinction, there's laughter here. There's mischief, chaos, curiosity. And where there are children, there's a future. Even if that future is currently trying to sneak a dead lizard into your boot. You notice it first in the way someone stands up slowly, too slowly. A groan, a wince, and a hand that lingers a moment too long on the ribs. In the Ice Age, injury is more than an inconvenience. It's a threat to the entire clan. Later you hear coughing, not the casual throat clear, but the deep rattle in the chest kind that makes everyone go quiet. The fire crackles, eyes meet. No one says it out loud, but the tension spikes. When someone gets sick here, the entire system adapts. You fetch snow, you boil water, you send for the healer. The healer isn't a doctor in the modern sense. She's an older woman with layers of furs, a pouch of crushed herbs, and the ability to make pain disappear, or at least become interesting enough to forget. Her tools are ancient bone needles, sharp flint, a hollowed horn for suction. Her knowledge is inherited, sacred, mysterious. She hums while she works. She mutters to unseen spirits. She pokes and prods, and finally nods, as if confirming something only she can see. The sick man is laid near the fire. Someone brings him a mixture of mashed pine needles and honey antiseptic, and mildly disgusting. He drinks it anyway. No one refuses the healer. She once set a broken leg with bark and moss, and it healed straight. She's also known to slap anyone who complains too much. You help grind some bitter-smelling bark into powder. The healer gestures for it, mixes it with melted fat, and smears it over the man's chest. The smell clears your sinuses instantly. It also makes your eyes water. Historians still argue whether Ice Age medicine was more ritual than science. From where you sit, it's both. There are chants and gestures and symbolic carvings placed by the patient's head. But there's also real skill. They know which plants numb pain, which mushrooms, to avoid how to cauterize a wound without killing the person it's attached to. Infections are feared. A simple cut can turn deadly if it festers. You remember one man who got a scratch from a bone shard. Within a week, his arm turned black. The healer tried everything. Herbs, leeches, smoke. In the end, he survived, but now uses the arm mostly as a weather gauge. For fever, they use willow bark, chewed raw, or brewed into a bitter tea. For burns, they apply animal fat mixed with moss. And if someone's in real pain, they use fermented fruit. The patient ends up giggling at nothing, singing old hunting songs, and occasionally forgetting their own name, but they don't feel the pain. Today's patient sleeps fitfully wrapped in every hide available. The healer sits nearby, grinding more herbs, her eyes never leaving his chest. The rest of you speak in whispers. Illness, like stories, travels fast. Children are kept away. They don't understand, and their curiosity is relentless. One tries to peek under the fur. You gently redirect them toward a pile of shiny rocks. It works for now. You help make broth, boiled bone, a few dried roots, whatever meat is softest. You spoon it into the sick man's mouth between snores. He grunts, smacks his lips, and murmurs something about fish flying. It's the best sign you've seen all day. By nightfall, the coughs have slowed. The healer finally nods off, propped against a mammoth femur. You take your place as watcher, tossing another bone onto the fire and listening to its pop. You look at the man's face, pale, sweaty, peaceful. He might live. He might not. This is the Ice Age. But tonight, you've done everything you could, and that's enough. Moving camp isn't a spontaneous decision. It's a logistical ballet performed on a frozen stage with no intermission. The signs are there: dwindling firewood, animal tracks, growing scarce waste piling up in unfortunate places. The elder declares it's time, and so begins the chaos. First comes the planning. You need to find a direction, somewhere the animals go where the snow isn't too deep, where there might be shelter. The scouts, two of the best trackers in the clan, set out before dawn and return with wind-burned cheeks and the smell of confidence. They've found a spot a half-day's walk away near a line of trees and a creek that might not be completely frozen. Everyone springs into motion. Hides are rolled tools, gathered meat bundled in leather wraps. Fires are doused, coals buried to retain warmth in case you come back. Someone makes sure no bone charm is left behind. It's not just superstition, it's insurance. Leaving sacred items is like walking out without your shoes. Packing is not elegant. There are no carts, no wheels. Sleds made of bone and wood are lashed with sinew and dragged across the snow. Children ride on top, clinging to bundles, and each other squealing every time the sled hits a bump. You're responsible for helping the elders, especially Grandma. She's sharp-tongued and slow-footed, bundled in so many layers, she resembles a very annoyed bear. You offer your arm. She accepts it with a grunt that might be gratitude or a warning. As the group sets off, the sound of movement fills the air: crunching snow, creaking leather, quiet muttering. It's like a pilgrimage. Every person a node in a long, shuffling centipede of survival. You pass landmarks: the charred stump where someone once burned their mittens by accident, the ridge where two people argued for an entire afternoon about whether clouds could smell like meat. It's strange to leave even stranger to realize how much you've noticed about a place you've barely lived in for a few weeks. Historians still argue how often Ice Age clans migrated. Some say constantly chasing herds. Others suggest seasonal hubs. What's clear from experience: when the clan moves, the world shifts. The trek is slow. The snow is unpredictable, soft one minute, crusted the next. You fall through, once nearly lose a boot. Swear softly. Grandma snickers. Occasionally, the group pauses for breath. Someone distributes dried berries. Another adjusts a sled's bindings. Children whine. Adults groan. You all keep walking. Then comes the creek. Half frozen, shallow, treacherous. The scouts guide the group to a narrow spot, stomp the snow, test the ice. You cross one at a time, nerves high. Grandma insists on going last. You wait with her heart in your throat as the ice groans beneath your boots, but it holds. The new sight isn't spectacular, but it's promising. Trees huddle like friends around a low hill. The creek gurgles, not entirely dead. Animal tracks lead in all directions. There's enough windbreak to survive, and enough space to build. Immediately, the work begins. Sleds are unpacked, fires rebuilt, hides are stretched, shelters reassembled. Grandma sits herself on a fur bundle and begins barking orders. You obey them. Everyone does. The smell of meat soon fills the air. Someone sets up a drying rack. Others begin shaping snow into insulation walls. Children dig delighted. The place begins to look like home. You sit back exhausted but proud. The clan has moved. No one was left behind, not even Grandma. You glance at the sky now, tinged with amber as the sun sets. Smoke rises. Voices murmur. The camp lives again. You lean back against your pack bones, aching, and smile. Tomorrow, the routine begins anew. But tonight, you rest knowing you carried your world across the ice and it didn't fall apart. Death is not a surprise in the Ice Age. It lurks in every shadow, rides every gust of wind, slips silently through every crack in your fur layers. But when it arrives, it's not always cruel. Sometimes it's soft, a quiet exhale, a hand that doesn't squeeze back, a space left empty near the fire. This time, it's old Tovin, the man who once claimed he could speak to mammoths and who wore an eagle feather, even in a blizzard. He didn't wake up. You find him with his arms folded, his face relaxed, like he simply decided to stop breathing. No drama, no fuss, just gone. The camp goes still, not silent, not shocked, just still. Death is familiar, but it's never casual. There's a process. First, the body is washed with melted snow, then wrapped tightly in his finest furs. His carvings are gathered, his favorite tools, a piece of flint shaped like a fish, a carved bone that he claimed whispered secrets when held to your ear. These are not buried with him out of sentiment. They are a declaration. This person lived, crafted, mattered. The burial site is chosen carefully uphill, where water won't pool. A few clan members dig, while others gather stones and paint. Red ochre is smeared across Tovin's forehead, a sign of safe passage, some say. Others say it's to keep the bad spirits from sniffing him out. Historians still argue whether Ice Age burials reflected belief in an afterlife or simply honored memory. You've seen enough ceremonies to believe it's both. Grief here isn't loud, but it's deep. The air gets heavier. Jokes fade. The fire is fed more often, as if its warmth can make up for what's missing. Children are told simple truths. Tovin is going on a journey. He won't be back. He might watch from the stars, or from inside a snowflake, or even as the wind that whistles through the trees. One child asks if he'll become a mammoth. No one says no. You help carry him. The furs are heavy, the silence heavier. He's placed in a shallow pit, curled on his side like he's sleeping. Stones are piled around him, forming a shelter for eternity. Someone adds a carved figurine, a mammoth naturally. Another presses a handprint onto a nearby rock using ochre and spit, a signature of farewell. The healer speaks. She doesn't chant or cry. She tells a story about the time Tovin got stuck in a tree trying to catch a raven. It's absurd, irreverent, and perfect. Everyone laughs, including you. The mood lifts just a touch. Back at camp, the fire is stoked high. A small feast is prepared in his honor. Meat is shared, stories exchanged. No one mentions the empty spot near the elder's tent, but everyone notices it. Death doesn't halt the world. It shifts it slightly, a ripple in the snow, a cold that settles a bit deeper in your chest. But life continues. That night, as you curl beneath your furs, you think about Tovin, about how he always claimed the moon was just a giant eye watching him specifically. You glance up at the sky and whisper, "Good night, you paranoid old goat." The stars blink in approval. The fire crackles, the wind howls, and somewhere on the hill, above a new stone shelter, guards a man who once tried to wrestle a goose because he didn't like its attitude. Sleep comes gently, as if even death is taking a night off to let the living rest. The air smells different this morning, moist, almost soft. You squint into the distance and notice it, the snow is shrinking. Not rapidly, not dramatically, but enough to matter. Puddles form, where once there was only packed ice. A new season is stirring beneath your feet, and it's starting to undo the world you've known. The ice age isn't over, not entirely, but you feel the shift. The cold no longer bites with the same venom. The wind still moans, but it seems less cruel, more like an old friend sighing in farewell. Animals react first. Herds begin to move differently, following newly opened paths. Birds return their cries sharper, more frequent. The air fills with the buzz of life. Tiny insects reappearing from nowhere, like they've been hiding in the snow, waiting for their moment. You help gather supplies, but the urgency has changed. It's no longer about simply surviving the frost. It's about adapting to a landscape that's waking up. The snow is slushier, harder to walk through. Your sled sticks, your boots squish, and your cloak smells vaguely of mildew. Someone stabs a stick into the ground and lets out a shout. It sinks past the frost line. The earth is softening. It's like seeing color for the first time after a long winter of grayscale. You find patches of green poking through snowdrifts, stubborn shoots small and defiant. One person cries when they see a flower, a single flower. You don't even know what it is, but it feels like magic. Historians still debate how quickly Ice Age humans noticed climate shifts. Some say they adapted seamlessly. Others argue that entire traditions collapsed. What you see is slower, incremental changes, quiet adjustments. The shelters are modified. The clothing gets lighter. The fire burns lower at night. You spot a bear in the distance, thinner than it should be, blinking in confusion. Animals are adjusting too, some better than others. Predators wander into new territories. Prey animals move farther afield. Hunting patterns must change. Everything is in flux. People begin talking about moving south, not just for the season, but for good. There are rumors of Greenland's rivers that don't freeze trees tall enough to block the sky. Some scoff. Others dream. Children chase frogs near the creek. Actual frogs. You'd nearly forgotten they existed. The laughter sounds brighter, less desperate. The camp feels different. Hope isn't a word you say aloud, but you feel it. Still, there's grief. Change means loss. The old ways, the sleds, the snow traps, the heavy cloaks, they become obsolete. Skills passed down for generations might fade. You catch the elder staring into the distance more often, less engaged in daily tasks. He mutters about the snow how it used to groan louder, last longer. You sit with him, not to debate, just to share silence. Evenings bring new rituals, less huddling, more storytelling. The fire is still the heart of the camp, but its glow feels more optional now. You stay up later, watching the sky shift from dull gray to soft indigo. Stars appear sooner. You dream differently. One night, you sleep without the full fur wrap, just a hide loosely draped. You wake up not freezing, but sweating. It's confusing. It's exhilarating. It's unsettling. You understand now that the Ice Age was never meant to last, that this chapter, hard and beautiful, is closing. The world is warming. The old gods might be melting with the glaciers, and new spirits will rise in the rivers and forests to come. You help a child plant a stick in the thawing dirt, marking nothing in particular. They say it's a tree. You smile and don't correct them. The seasons are changing. The world is changing. And so will you. You lie back your head, resting on bundled furs, and listen to the creak and sigh of the thawing world. The wind has softened it no longer, hisses through bone huts or bites at your skin. It hums now, low and tired, as if even the Ice Age itself is ready for sleep. The fire beside you burns low, its embers glowing gently like the eyes of something ancient content. Your companions murmur nearby laughter and quiet voices rising and falling like a lullaby. Somewhere, a stream trickles, not frozen, not roaring, just a soft and steady whisper. The stars above seem closer tonight, watching without judgment. The air smells faintly of green things, not much, just a hint, like a memory of forests yet to grow. You pull your fur tighter, not out of cold, but from habit. Old instincts take time to thaw. Your feet are sore, your arms heavy, but your mind is light. You've survived cold hunger wolves and uncertainty. You've built, hunted, stitched, and sung. You've grieved, laughed, and loved under skies that never promised tomorrow. And now the world shifts, quietly, slowly, like an exhale, like sleep. Your breath slows, your muscles soften. The last images flicker behind your eyes, a mammoth's silhouette. In the dusk, a child's muddy grin, the glint of flint in a calloused hand. You don't need to remember everything. You've lived it. It's in your bones, in your breath, in the hush of the snow outside. So rest now. Let your mind drift with the melting ice. Let the old cold fade behind you and the gentle dark wrap around you like a lullaby. Sleep. You're safe. You're home.